What's up, brother? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. Oh, wait. Come on.
Did you see who got the decision? Did you see?
No. What
I thought
happened?
the fight was terrible. I don't know if you watched any of it.
You talking about the Jake Paul?
Yeah.
No, I didn't see it. I was on the phone with someone. They said it's about to start. I actually thought it was yesterday, and I just missed it. But what happened? I mean, Tommy's
Well, I mean,
his.
they were just grabbing each other the whole fight. Both of them were just hugging, and it was
Mm.
horrible. And I know Jake Paul does that a lot.
So like glorified sparring, or
No, I think Tommy beat him, but
oh really?
yeah, Jake Paul was hugging, probably 90% of the fight.
Oh
It was
wow. And
terrible.
and and Tommy, what I think the one thing I read was his opponents' combined records were like 30 and 100 something.
Yeah, but he looked better than Paul for
Wow,
sure.
wow,
you know.
wow.
But they took a point away from both of
Already.
them for grabbing too much.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it was
Uh,
terrible.
yeah.
If
Yeah.
if
So
if
what's up,
they
man? How
give
are
the
things in
decision, one of
Oklahoma?
y'all can put it in the comments, please. But I'm gonna start here with Christian. He has a big following here on TikTok, but he actually has a long history in MMA, and I've interviewed him before, and so I kind of wanted to, maybe let you start out with like your first kind of introduction to MMA.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I was first introduced to mixed martial arts while I was in California at the Tachi Palace Hotel and Casino, which in Lemoore, California, which is now was at the time called the Palace Indian Gaming Center. And our marketing director came to me. I was the head of entertainment. Our marketing director came to me and said, "Hey, I've got my cousin's husband wants to put on these fights, these MMA fights, like the UFC." And this is back in the year 2000, right? So this is just going back. And he said his name's Reed Harris, and he's a mortgage guy, and he's got a matchmaker buddy that he trains with, Scott Adams. He fought in the UFC, and they got this guy Chuck Liddell. He's like this crazy kickboxer guy, and I'd seen Chuck fight at Table Mountain in the IFC for Paul Smith. He beat Steve Heath, and basically we had been doing concerts and putting fights on in boxing, and I said let's give it a shot. We'll try. Um, Scott didn't want to fight anymore. He had just beat Ian Freeman in the UFC. His next fight was going to be Arlovsky, and he just didn't want to fight. He owned slow kickboxing with Chuck, and he liked, he wanted to segue into matchmaking. So basically, we helped them create the WEC with my entertainment budget through the casino, just like if I would have bought a concert with Kool and the Gang or Earth, Wind and Fire, and said, here's the money, bring the show. So we went to Reed, and then we worked out a deal and said, okay, here we're going to pay for everything. Let's put this together. And then from the minute it started, I was hooked. And that was our first show. I was looking it up, man. It's so crazy how time flies. Our first WEC event was June 30th of 2001. The main event was Dan Severn and Travis Fulton. Leonard
Wow.
Garcia was on that. He was the second prelim on that fight. Chris Sanford, who went on to do Tough, was on that fight. Um, and then a really, really tough, Gan McGee, who ended up in the UFC, was on there, was on that
Mhm.
card. And then a really tough wrestler from Seth Petrozelli, actually, who fought Gan. But there was a tough kid on there from Fresno State, Lalo Mose. He was from Central California. He was a wrestler, and he fought. I thought he would have had a hell of a career if he stuck with it, but he didn't. Um, and so that was like my introduction to it. And from then it was like the people just came, man. And we're in the middle of nowhere, Central California, basically, and out in the field or in a tent, depending on the time of the year. And we would have, you know, some of these shows, 4,000, 5,000 people show up. I mean, it was just a who's who of now looking back, like UFC Hall of Famers that cut their teeth there, and we did that for 6 years. And the UFC bought them, and we could talk about that, too, why the UFC bought the WEC and what have you. But because there was definitely a television strategy behind that. And then after that happened, I created the PFC on like 45 days notice because they pulled the WEC out of Lemoore uh, really fast, and it kind of hurt because we built it, with them. And but I understood. I mean, I understood. Their operations were in Vegas, but yeah, man. So that was it. And then from there, PFC, and then I did some Playboy fights and fights at the Playboy Mansion, and I actually stage managed the first and only I think WFA pay per view. It was Mashida's U.S. debut. Rampage fought Linland in the main event. Um, then I went to Bellator, and I was with Bellator for 4 years, just about as their executive director of fight operations and venue relations, which is a long way to say that I basically was ultimately responsible for anything that led up to the fighters making it into the cage to compete. Or my team was, but I would get, Bjorn would get, it would be my head if something went wrong, probably. And then venue relations, where I was cutting the deals with all the casinos, selling the shows, and negotiating the arena deals and stuff. And it was a fun time. It was crazy though.
But like your position with Tachi, what would you say as far as like, how you have president, vice president? So what was your position
I, so I
in the hierarchy of that?
Yeah, so I was the director of entertainment. So I was the head of the entertainment department. I had all the autonomy on what concerts, what fights, whatever we did, and boxing, MMA, and we carved out a really strong niche with MMA, and we had a lot. And here's the thing is, there's so much talent in California, and being in Central California and Fresno, I mean, we had so much talent just right there between. Not even when you get to San Jose and you start hitting the AKAs and the CSAs and all that stuff, and then Southern California, which of course was just bonkers. There was a ton of super tough guys, man, sent from Central California, like the coast, San Luis area, Tim Kennedy, Scott Carson, Cruz Gomez, a lot of guys that people don't even have never heard of. Von Flu, I knew what the Von Flu choke was way before it was the Von Flu choke. Um, you know, and then Cole Escovedo, Poppies Martinez, the Bakersfield people. Like there was so much talent in the valley. It was just tough. It was tough to ignore.
So your position was pretty high up then, if you were like the director of entertainment for Tachi.
Yeah, I've been I was hired as a special events manager, and after a few years, I was promoted to director of entertainment. About when I was about 28 years old, I think, and I've always been a director of entertainment. Now I'm a director of entertainment for 3 casinos here in New York on the
But I
corporate
mean,
level.
when it came to the promotion, the fight promotion itself,
Yeah.
because were they separate or together?
Ooh.
You know how you worked for Tachi as director of entertainment,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
did you also work for this Tachi Palace Fights, you
Oh,
know,
well, the Tati
organization?
Palace fights thing came after. No, so
Okay.
basically like the world like WEC, it was me just like if I was say I'd buy Smokey Robinson, I put Smokey Robinson on, and then I'd do Carrot Top or whatever BB King, and then it was like, oh, let's put a WEC show in, and then just we had a contract with Reed and Scott, and we paid him X amount to put the show on. I did most of the marketing. I did a lot of the undercard matchmaking. Um, found a lot of some of the guys like Doug Marshall. I found for my tattoo artist,
Yeah,
things
man,
like
he's
that.
great.
He's fantastic, man. Yeah, I was getting a tattoo, and my buddy was like, he was like, "Hey, my friend's really tough. He wants to fight. Will you give him a shot?" And I was like, and this is back in the Wild West. I was like, "Yeah, I mean, sight unseen. I trust you." So we put him in there with, I think his first fight was LeVar Johnson. So it's pretty crazy. LeVar we found through I did the Tough Man contest with our door, and that's how I found LeVar. And I was like, dude, you are gonna fight MMA. Like you have to. And
Right.
so yeah, but I didn't work separately for the WEC. I worked for the casino. I worked, for the Santa Rosa Rancheria, and they really deserve the credit because honestly, they're the ones that paid for the WEC. They built it. Like without the Tachioka tribe, the sport of MMA, in my opinion, would not have grown the way it did. We were doing 8, 6, 5, 6 shows a year, big names. We were flying in fighters from all over, and we wanted to go big. We wanted so it got to the point where everyone knew in the United States if you wanted to get to the UFC, the WEC was where you proved yourself. We were always on emails with Joe Silva, and then we got the HD Net deal. That was like a game changer too. Because that was the first promotion on HD Net, and um, we just it was the Wild West days, man. Still, and looking back, it's just really really honor to be a part of it.
Didn't Tachi do UFC's first show in COVID?
They
Don't you
were going
remember?
to. They were going
Right.
to. Um, so the UFC's first ever event in the state of California was supposed to be at the Tachi Palace. So it was the first Ultimate Fight Night, which I can't remember what year it was, 2005 ish, somewhere around there, 4 or 5, I don't know, maybe six. Um, no, I, yeah, it was somewhere around there. But myself and our general manager flew out to Vegas. We met with Dana. We met with Kirk Hendrick. This was like February of that year. Whenever the first Ultimate Fight Night happened, okay, I can't remember the year. We met early in the year, like January, February, and the event was going to be in the summer. And everything was like, well, can you do this, and they knew we were capable of pulling it off, but it was UFC, so they were like, can you build a 7,000 seat outdoor grandstands? And I was like, absolutely, we'll get them from Mike Brown grandstands, we'll build them, not a problem. If you ever look at any of the old WEC shows, our staging was elaborate. Like, we wanted to give it like a pride feel, so we just had big super trusses, and the fighters came up off elevators on the stage, and pyro and fire and all that stuff. It was cool, and this was before MMA was legal in California too. I want to point that out. We were doing. Everyone says Strike Force was the first. I understand they were the first sanctioned event, but we were doing shows like 5 years before them.
Right. And what I was talking about was, that UC had promised Tachi a show. I think it was going into COVID. I think they were gonna let them do a show or something.
They were.
Then it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. There was some backlash and stuff. Yeah, but they were
Right.
going to do it. Jacob Jeff, who's the director of slots, he's a purple belt jiu-jitsu, and he used to help us with the fights, and he's been a big advocate. He's a tribal member, been a big advocate for the sport there. And then their new GM, yeah, they were going to do it, but it didn't. I'm pretty sure that was William Morris or whoever the TV network was saying, no, you can't do that. And then they had Fight Island going on too, so it was probably what makes more sense for them um, long term. So they did that Fight Island thing.
But isn't it ironic? The UFC never gave them that show. They said they were going to give them.
Yeah, yeah,
You
they
know.
won't. It's too small. They don't have a venue. Yeah, it's it's a shame, man. I tell everyone all this now. Like, I think the Tachioka tribe and the Tachi Palace should actually be in the UFC Hall of Fame. I really do, because without them, like, it wouldn't. Like, I can go through the list of guys that we found and discovered, and I mean, the list of people that fought in the WEC. Uh, it's I can't even count how many Hall of Famers and stuff were competed. It was nuts, man. Every show was stacked, and um, then we did shows at Mohegan Sun. So we were, and I traveled with them. I did go help them because basically Reed and Scott had never done events before, and I was an entertainment director. I'd already promoted Montel Griffin in boxing. I already done boxing shows on different networks and concerts. So I was teaching them how to run events, and whether they want to admit it or not, because they had never done it. Scott
Mhm.
was a heck of a matchmaker, and Reed is a really savvy businessman. And to his credit, as you can tell, because he's still with the UFC as a vice president, 16 years later, I think, after they sold. So, good businessman, and but yeah, it was a fun time, man. Like, it was crazy. Like, there was just so many, Nate Diaz making his pro debut with us. Nick Diaz fighting with us. Frank Shamrock, WE6, he fought. We tried to get that one on Showtime. Actually, flew to New York City, met with Jay Larkin and stuff. But Showtime didn't want to bite on MMA at the time. Um, but yeah, man, it was. I've and then finding out, like, early first week in December, that the WEC was gonna. We had a show in January. It was supposed to be January 2007 in Lemoore, and then Reed and Scott sold in December of 2006. And I
Yeah,
basically had,
tell
like,
me about that. Because I
yeah,
think a
it
lot of
was.
people would like to hear about that. We didn't talk about that last time.
Yeah. So what was going on, man, was really behind the scenes. The UFC had the deal with Viacom, and they were on Spike. And the IFL, which was an organization for a lot of folks that weren't into MMA back in the early 2000s, the IFL was a team-based mixed martial arts organization. They had Team LA and they had a coach and they had a team and different Dallas. I can't remember all the markets, but
Right.
Garib, Seamus, he was one of the co-creators, and he was someone that I think defected the UFC to go create this, and they started to catch on. They had a small little regional TV deal.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Fox Sports won, probably something like that. But then what was happening was the Versus Network, because the sport was starting to get popular. And again, this is before the Ultimate Fighter, so the UFC still was not making money at this time,
Mm-hmm.
but it was starting to catch on. And the IFL Versus was looking for something, and the IFL I think was going to get the deal, and the UFC thought, as they should, why would we want a competitor on another network? So what they did was they looked and tried to figure out who they could buy, and it came down to, from what I was the way I understood it, it was the WEC, because we were basically the AAA. At that point, everyone knew who it was. We were on HDNet. We had all these crazy fighters, great fighters, and crazy characters like Olaf Alfonso, and then we went ahead and got Uriah and Locked Up and all that stuff. Or Total Combat, which was a show that was out of San Diego that was run in part by Eric Del Fierro, who ended up, was Dom Cruz's coach and stuff. And they did a lot of shows in Mexico. And they were great shows. I used to go to their shows in Tijuana. That was a lot of fun. I'm not going to lie. But the WC was more suited for TV and it really had fighters under contract. I locked Doug Marshall into a multi-fight agreement before it was sold. And thankfully they honored it. But basically, yeah, the UFC said we can't let a competitor be on TV, so they bought the WEC, put the WEC on Versus to plug that hole in the programming, but they didn't breach their contract to Viacom, because the UFC itself didn't go to another network. It was just another promotion that fell under under Zuffa in the long run.
Now talk about Bellator, because I know we got into that, but I think that's kind of like, I don't know, maybe you won't agree. Was that like your high point, your time with Bellator, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like my proudest stuff was actually creating the PFC, the Palace Fighting Championship, because what happened when the UFC sold, they Peter Dropic, who went to the UFC from the Pond in Anaheim, and I think he's still there, does their arena deals. He came over and like the casino in Lemoore, we didn't have the greatest venue. I mean, they still don't really have a venue. So I knew it was going to be a bit of a challenge, and it was like a site survey to figure out, okay, we have this show next month, or what can we do? Can we still do it? And during the course of that site survey, I could just tell that they just didn't want to stay in Lemoore. Everything was like, can you do this? And I was like, yes, I can do that. Oh, okay, well, can you do that? They just kept raising the bar. Like, oh, can you give us these many days to set up? And I'd make a phone call, and bingo was shut down, and I'd say, yes, you got it. Oh, we can get this now. Can we get this? And I just said, you know what? It doesn't seem like you guys want to be here. And I kind of like left. I was pissed and I was hurt, because it was like they were turning their back on the tribe. And as a professional Native American myself, it stung when people come in and just take what you helped build and have no regard. So I went home and I was sitting around, and I finally talked to Reed about 10 o'clock at night or something. And it was early December of 2006. And he said, man, I'm sorry. Something went wrong with the site survey, right? You weren't, I must have they said I ran my mouth or something. I didn't. I just made a joke. People don't understand my sense of humor. He was like, Dana's really pissed, man. He can't go there. And I was like, Reed, they weren't going to come here anyways, man. So Dana's not mad at what I said. They were looking for an out anyways to go to Vegas. I know it. That's where all their staff is. Why are they going to spend money to travel everyone to Lemoore, to a venue that's not ideal, when they can go to the Pearl at the Palms, and everyone, you know what I mean? Everything was right there. So that happened. But I literally went in the office at like midnight, and by 8, 9 in the morning, I had created the PFC. I had designed the first fight card. I had Uriah actually scheduled to fight for it, and then they shut that down. Just like we actually had Chuck Liddell was going to fight in WEC 1. He was the Severn and Fulton were only the main event because Chuck got pulled at the last minute. We got a cease and desist from Zuffa. Chuck had just beat Randleman in Japan. And this is so early that these fighters weren't locked into ironclad contracts that were like super immutable. You know what I mean? There was, so, yeah. But I think I have the most pride of like getting the PFC off the ground. Ended up cutting a deal with Comcast Sportsnet. So we were on in like 7 million homes. But then in terms of like my career and the like, I guess the glitzy side of MMA, you know, with Bellator for sure would be it. You know, I was the executive director of, you can't see this, but it says decision maker, and there was only like 3 of these, me, Coker, and probably Carey. You know, and this basically said, this was like anything we said went in the venue. So that was cool. It was a lot of fun. I loved working for Bjorn. I left something. I brought this out too because this is a black glove, and you see fighters now in Bellator wearing black gloves, but they didn't wear black gloves until I got there. So what happens is when fighters, if people that don't know, fighters say the fight's on Saturday, fighters actually start to fly into town on the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, depending on where they're coming from. And, you know, our fight operations team, which is what I would head up, they were there. We'd get them from the airport, get them to the hotel, check their weight. You monitor their weight all week, you know, make sure they're good, you know, make sure all their paperwork's in. And they do like video interviews and photos and stuff. And what happens is the TV people would need photos in red gloves and blue gloves because they didn't know you might have a corner assignment change, so you have to flip. And then finally I told them, I said, why don't we just use black gloves for the tail of the tape? And then obviously the red and blue for, you know, the fights. And they were like, huh. So now Bellator uses black gloves for the tail of the tape. And then you don't have to worry about, because it would happen a lot of times, like there'd be, the fight card would change, right? Because after weigh-ins, you know, nothing settled till weigh-ins. And then the graphic designer, in this case, Eric Coleman at Bellator, he'd have to go back in and cut the picture out and change the thing, you know, and it was a pain. So this helped. This glove's actually autographed by Kimbo Slice and Ken Shamrock from when they fought in St. Louis. So rest in peace, Ferg. And yeah, man. But yeah, Bellator that was like, you know, I guess that's really as big as you can get. That's as high as you can get, you know, in the U.S. Other than the UFC.
Talk about when you first met Bjorn.
When I first met Bjorn?
Yeah, because he's like a white whale of MMA now, you know. No one can find him.
Wait, what does that mean, a white whale?
You know, the book Moby Dick, where the captain, you know, drove him mad trying to catch this white whale.
Oh yeah. So it was interesting, man. I was freelancing. I wasn't in Lemoore anymore. I spent a couple of years. I was doing the Playboy things and had my own company called CP Presents, and I did like things like So You Think You Could Fight, which was basically like amateur kickboxing, but I gave it the treatment of like a So You Think You Can Dance show. In terms of marketing, I did I created this thing called the Sacred Circus, which is like just a bunch of wild music and MMA and carnival games. I created this thing called WOW, which was women's oil wrestling. I did 8 women tournaments in the cage in one night for $1,000, and the women submission grappled covered in baby oil. And I had like Doug Marshall be my guest referee. So I did all that stuff for a few years. I designed an amphitheater at the base of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And but then I joined Bellator. Ken Pavia, who was an MMA agent, ended up selling his agency to Audi, I believe it was. You know, he was tight with Bjorn. Him and Alexei Zernikov had, you know, putting Shlemenko and stuff in there, and the Russians. And he said, hey, they're you know, Bjorn's, they're going to move from Chicago. They're getting ready to go to Spike. Like Viacom's getting more involved, and because they were on ESPN3 and MTV2 and all that stuff. So when I joined them, they were still headquartered in Chicago. They were getting ready to move to Newport Beach to open up the office out there, be closer to Viacom, which is headquartered in Santa Monica on the West Coast. And I joined. I went out there. I joined right before Bellator 73 in August of 2012, and jumped in and started, you know, cutting some casino deals right away. And I got the Pachanga deal, the WinStar deal, Kansas Star deal. I did almost every casino deal that they had, other than the Caesars and Harrah's and stuff. And it brought in good revenue. You know what I mean? I was bringing in 7 figures a year for them in casino site fees, and they took good care of me. Took good care of me. And Bjorn was such an interesting guy because, to a lot of people, they thought he was like this evil dude and whatever. And did he have an acidic tongue, and was he mean sometimes? And yes. Was he foul mouthed? Yes. Would he tell me to go, have some? Yes. He said some shit that you don't say normally in workplaces, right? But he was also, I respected this about Bjorn. I knew where I stood with him. If I was doing a good job, he let me know. If I was doing a job that was under the level that he expected, he let me know as well. But he would just let you know in such a way that was a little over the top sometimes, because you don't have to tell people to go F their mother and stuff, because they're not. But he was that kind of guy. But then he was also really nice too, and fun and just driven and smart. But I like the fact that he was transparent, and he is who he was. And he would tell me, we would be on trips, like, see, and he and I would travel together by ourselves, to do some of these casino deals. And he was like, man, he was like, I have a certain amount of like charm and patience every day, and then once it's gone, it's game over. Whatever happens. And it was cool. Tim Danaher is who I interviewed with at first. Ken told me they were looking for someone. I flew to New York City. They didn't fly me there. I flew on my own. I flew to New York City. I interviewed with Tim Danaher. He was the one that brought the money into to Bellator. And it just kind of worked. I really enjoyed the crew. I liked the team. I loved the travel, the camaraderie. And then after about 2 years, man, they turned it all upside down, and it wasn't that much fun anymore.
Do you think that's why Bjorn never came back, because he rubbed people the wrong way and can't come back?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't think any existing organization, because he really just had such a bad reputation, and it wasn't all justified in my opinion. But yeah, I don't think any organization, it wouldn't have been looked at as a good hire, to bring him in. And then, honestly, like, Bjorn's the type where he didn't want to just exist. He wanted to compete with the UFC, and he wanted Bellator to be right there, and to literally be, taken as seriously as the UFC. And I just don't think that there's no other promotion that'll do that. They were too far out in front. And he's a lawyer. He has other options. His wife's real successful. I don't know what he made, on the buyout, but I'm sure he was okay. We talked a few times since, when he was trying to do the union thing, but haven't really talked much. I don't know if he's practicing law or whatever, but wherever he is, wherever you are, Bjorn, if you're out there, or if anyone sees this and knows Bjorn, please tell him I said hello, because I'll always appreciate the fact that he gave me a chance there.
I mean, I find it interesting. You think he might have not been a good hire? I thought he did a great job with Bellator, much better than how it's being run now.
I agree,
And I
man.
think there's people out there that have admiration for what he built.
Yeah.
From
I
the show concept to everything. I think because a lot of people were watching it.
Yeah. The numbers before Coker were way better. Let's be honest. Like, I'll
Yeah.
just cut through the bullshit. The ratings were better before Scott Coker, and the business was more profitable. I don't know what their top line revenue looks like, but I know their expenses went through the roof when he joined. And I didn't see any appreciable difference in live event numbers, which I was privy to, or ratings. Obviously, you know what I mean. Like, we were starting to crush it a little bit here and there when Bjorn was there. We had, and it's it just feels like we had this momentum. And yes, it's tough to promote a tournament. 8 straight weeks, take a week off, 3 more weeks. It's hard to promote and market that way, but it's really cool for television, because it's consistent programming every week, and that's how you can develop a following. And then when they made the switch and brought Scott in, I was excited because we had mutual friends, and he had experience with Strikeforce, um, but it was just different. It was just really different. It just feels like all the momentum we just lost it, and then it was like, then I'm stuck here living in San Jose. It fucking sucks here. There's nothing to do. It's like all sterile, and
Oh yeah.
I didn't like San Jose too much. No, they took like three of us, moved us to San Jose when Scott took over because he wasn't going to move to Newport, so we had to shutter that office. Then they took the CFO and other folks, and Tracy and George with legal, put them in Santa Monica at the MTV offices, or Viacom offices, I should say. And then a few of us went up to San Jose and worked out of an office there. But Coker he wasn't even in the office a lot. We'd have to go into town to meet him at a coffee shop by his house. Just nice guy. I'm not gonna say anything bad. Nice guy, but just very different than I had imagined. That's all.
Yeah, the MMA Conspiracy Hour, the guys on that show, they were saying just as they think Coker kind of works for the UFC and he was brought in to kind of kill Bellator or, you know,
No,
or maybe drive it down,
he so basically he was ignored at the UFC. He was there when they bought Strikeforce, and Dana thought he was a moron, and as did most of the executives. I'm not trying to, I'm not putting words, I don't want to put
Yeah.
words in Dana's mouth, but this is the way it's been explained to me, is that they just didn't think he knew how to promote other than in San Jose as a local promoter, where it's easy to promote in your hometown, especially when it's Silicon Valley and you have, all your people and everyone has a ton of money. It's harder to promote in Thackerville, Oklahoma, when you have to help a casino fill the seats. It's hard to promote in Mulvane, Kansas. And, so yeah, man. No, Coker wasn't brought in to bring it down. They really thought what happened, I think, was Mike Kogan and Kevin K. Kevin K, yeah, he was the head of Spike. They were tight, right? They were close. And Kogan basically, I think, was in K's ear because he didn't like Bjorn. And then, Mo and Rampage had the fight and the pay-per-view fight we did in Tennessee. And then that's when Mo called Bjorn a dick rider live on TV. Excuse my language. And then it was like, a couple months later, it was over. But I think it was already like in the works that they were trying to do something. And Bjorn was he was adversarial with the Viacom people in production meetings and TV meetings and stuff, But I saw his point because this was his baby, So he didn't want to relinquish 100% of the creative control. He could have been a little more compromising and probably played better with the Viacom folks and the directors and producers and stuff. The director he loved, Robbie Biner, rest in peace. He's an amazing director. But I don't think Bjorn had the best relationship with like the executive producers and stuff. So, but yeah, Coker wasn't brought in, and he doesn't work for the UFC. He's just really not that good of a promoter, in my opinion.
But why do you think Viacom? Because they knew what product they had. And I thought it was a good alternative to the UFC. Then they bring Coker in and they just flip the whole thing upside down. What do you
Yeah, I
think they
mean,
were thinking?
well, I've learned this like just through my business life, like being a casino executive. When there's new people, the first thing, if the ownership wasn't happy with the previous CEO or what have you, president, the it's natural for people to say, okay, well, I'm different. I'm going to do it different. So Coker's big thing when he came in was this he would say, this tournament model is, you can't do this. You can't promote week to week. It doesn't give you enough time to build, to market and promote the shows, and that's why you're not getting. And then he was like, we're
Why
not
not? You've been doing it. What is he talking about?
exactly. And he was like, we're
Yeah.
not going to do casinos anymore. We want to move into big venues. So I think he sold them on, I can make you bigger and better and take things to scale. But he's never done it, because all he did with Strikeforce was burn through other people's money. And all he's done with Viacom is burn through other people's money. Now, maybe they're making money. I don't know. Maybe they're doing their license fees at all these different countries are and some of these deals that they're doing like in Hawaii and stuff are probably cost effective, because I'm assuming that they're probably just using cages from over there and leaning on TJ and all those guys, as opposed to like Bellator. When I was with them, we were looking at going to Hawaii, but we were gonna travel all our own stuff. and that's crazy, crazy expensive. That's why you didn't see the UFC do it for so long either, because they didn't want to just go over there and like co-promote with Rumble on the Rock or TJ or whoever. Um, and but Coker's, he'll do that, which is, I think, is okay. I think it's strategically, if you want to break into a new market, you want to have buy-in from the local promoters, because you don't want them to counter program you. You don't want them to lock up. This is especially important for a promotion like Bellator. You don't want a local show. You don't want to come into, like, say we go to St. Louis and Jesse Finney has Shamrock fight, FC there, and real successful. He's got all the locals. You don't want to go in there as Bellator, because you need those undercard fighters to sell tickets, because your main event fighters, your TV fighters, more than likely are not going to resonate with the local market. And then it's not like Bellator was at the tip of everyone's tongue either. So he had to use promoters so he could have access to the local fighters to sell tickets. Do I think at the Bellator level, you should be putting fighters on cards to sell tickets? No, I think the promoter and the brand should be able to sell the shows themselves. And you don't need 20. Sometimes have like 20 undercard fights, man, because we had to, sell so many tickets, and we'd have fights after TV. It was horrible.
Right, and I wonder, because from a rating standpoint, it's not doing as well as it was. So what do you think they're thinking now? Like, you
How can
know,
we get out of this? How can we sell? I
you think so?
personally,
You think they're still trying to do that behind the scenes, you think?
I think so, personally, and if not, I would encourage them to consider it, because if all Viacom wants is MMA programming to plug in, it's a lot cheaper, unless they're making money. If they don't sell, it's because they're making money and they're not getting a big enough offer. But if you just want content, you can license content from, Bellator can get sold to whoever, and you can license the content for a lot cheaper than it's going to cost for you to run the entire company without question. You know what I mean? So, I feel like that's what they would try to do. But like, who can buy them? Who's going to buy them? PFL's not going to buy them. I
Who
mean,
would want
maybe,
to?
but
You
huh?
know what I mean?
Yeah,
Who would even want to at this
yeah.
point?
I mean, I there's just there's some. I mean, I absolutely still feel like there's some of the best talent in the world there.
Yes.
I love Patricio and Patricky. Um, you know, um, there's some talent there. There's really, really great fighters. But they just, and obviously Antonio McKee Jr. and,
Amosov, the guy who just won.
yeah, Emerson, yeah,
Amosov, Jesus.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, super tough, 27-0,
Unbelievable.
but like
Yeah.
no one knows who he is. And
Yeah.
so I feel like WME, like, the parent company of UFC, like, I think they probably just let Bellator die on the vine, and then wait for the price to get really, really low, because it's not going to appreciate in value. I don't think personally. Um, I think they had a chance, but I yeah, it's just tough, man. It's really tough to do what they're doing. Like, there's no consistency, and you know, but I love them, and I sent Patchy. Well, I didn't send him there, but the first time I saw Pat Mix, he was in King of the Cage at my casinos where I took over after I left Bellator. And I immediately was texting Mick Maynard, and I was texting Rich Chu and everyone, Ian Matthews, Kogan, all those people. And I was saying that this kid right here is the real deal. And so I know a thing or two, because he's in that $1 million, he's in the finals, and I'm happy for him.
No, but as someone who's in the business, you said something just a moment ago. I want you to elaborate on it. You said maybe WME would wait till the value gets low enough. What, just to buy their library? Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, you got Fight Pass, so you want to continue to add to Fight Pass. All of our WEC stuff's on Fight Pass. You can watch those. You can see me if anyone has UFC Fight Pass. You'll see me in some of those in the cage. But yeah, I think, it's like any bit. Like, you let them struggle. Like, if they're struggling, let them struggle until they're out of breath, and then buy them. Buy them when they bottom out. I mean, it's just like the stock market or crypto. For me, I trade crypto. Like, you don't want to buy when it's green. You want to wait until you try to find the bottom and they're desperate, and that's when you try to buy. But yeah, I yeah. I mean, the other thing is they're not a threat. I don't think the UFC really sees them as a threat. Like, they're not eating into the ratings. They're not. You know, when they get guys that leave the UFC to come to Bellator, it's really just been guys that could they still like Bader and stuff. Yeah, they could still be in the UFC, but you know, they got paid way more than market value to jump ship. You know, and less and they're fighting lesser competition on average. So can't fault the fighters for that because it's a tough business. You know, it's the hurt business. So if you can make more money and assume less risk by fighting some guys that are probably not as tough, you know, um, overall, fight after fight, it makes sense.
But
What's
you
up,
kind of
Shannon?
see PFL coming in and kind of doing what Bjorn was doing with Bellator to some extent.
What's that?
PFL.
PFL. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know enough about them. You know how they're run and the mechanics or anything, but it's interesting. I just no one's gonna get big. No one's gonna ever overtake the UFC. I think everyone just like you know they got to stop thinking that. And if I hear one more thing about how PFL is the number 2 in the world, and maybe they are, I don't know, but I think that just kind of I don't know. I
Right,
just
but
don't
I'm
think I don't
saying
nothing.
I
They
think
don't
what
do anything
fans
that excites
want,
me, huh?
I think what fans want is an alternative to watch. It may not be bigger,
Yeah,
but when you bring Scott Coker in, right, you basically turned it into something that was the UFC, but not as good. A matchmaking event,
yeah,
not a seasonal
yeah,
tournament.
yeah,
Bellator was an alternative, even if it wasn't as big as the UFC.
yeah.
It was a
No,
viable alternative that you could watch that was
yeah.
totally different.
It was yeah, exactly. You hit the nail
Yeah,
on the head. It was a distinct product. You know, it was the toughest tournament in sports. I still have
right.
all the T-shirts, all the everything. You know, I have so much stuff. Yeah, tough. You win 3 fights in 3 months. You earn that $100,000. You know, and it made it compelling. It created storylines. You know, that ran for 12 weeks, which is like a series. You know, like a TV series. You know, like a Netflix series or something. So it kept people engaged. I really do believe it kept people engaged, and I think that's really what helped a lot of the ratings. You know, moving from MTV2 to Spike was big. You know, obviously, we're in more households. Um, but yeah, when Scott said you can't do like the tournament thing, and then we're not going to do this and that, and then he comes back and he does tournaments, and I'm like,
Yeah,
and then you
exactly.
know, it was just yeah, it's he's I don't know, man. I just thought it was going to be different. Like I thought it was going to be different. He's just it wasn't what I expected. So I knew right away that, and I stayed there. I stayed through. They got rid of like half the staff. They kept me, but I knew that I was like, this is not going to be the place for me long term because he's threatened. He feels threatened. You know, I can read energy, Todd, like I really do. And the first thing Coker did when he came in was he asked us all to write down, our job, what we do, and what we think we could do. And for me, he said, what do you think this company needs? Create a job description based on what you think this company needs. So I took my time. I wrote a job description that basically would have been like, because his point of contention with the tournaments was that it was hard to market week to week in all these different markets. And I said, well, we need someone on the ground. And we would send out Zach Light and Ian Matthews to get the local fighters and get some posters out. But we didn't have anyone that was actually ever really a promoter, and I'm used to being in front of the camera. I'm used to selling fights. I brought Floyd Mayweather to Fresno in 2003 for a fight. You know what I mean? So I've been around high level events. I put together this job description, which basically would have been doing everything I was already doing, overseeing the fight operations, cutting the deals, but then also hitting the road and marketing in the local area and working the radio stations and trying to find some local sponsorships and things like that. Things that I was successful with the WEC, and I brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to the WEC and sponsorships that went directly to them. I just did it because it was events we were hosting, and I thought I was kind of like creating something that the company needed in order to succeed, and to see his vision through. And all he told me was, and I'll never forget this. He looked at me and he was like, yeah, I read it. And he goes, sounds like you want to be the boss. Are you sure you are okay just working here? You want to just start your own company again? And I was just like, no, man. I'm just trying to help. You know, if you don't. it was a weird dynamic. You got to like he hired a lot of his old karate students. You know, he's a karate guy at own schools and stuff. He would hire a lot of his old karate students, and they would like call him master and stuff. While we're working for Bellator, they would speak. They would say, "Oh, Master Coker, Master," and I'm like, I ain't calling no one fucking master. You know, like no. He yelled at me one time because I was doing all the casino deals, right? And I worked for the company, so you're just paying me my little commission, and then they tried to take my commission out. And I'm like, whatever, you know. But then he brought in a guy named Steve, I'll say from San Jose, that helped with Strikeforce that did his arena deals. But you had to pay that guy separately. And it's like, why would you go pay someone to do something that I already do? I'm already renting the arenas, and like he's not going to get a better deal than I am. Not really, maybe not to justify what you're going to pay him. To me, Coker's all about the homie hookup. If you're his homie, he was hooking you up. If you weren't, you know, yeah. So, and by hooking up, I mean overpaying, overspending. You know, you don't need to fly fighters business class or first class from Europe. You know, you just don't do that. You know, I mean, if it's your champion or something, okay, I get it. But I just think some people treat other people's money like it's you're not real. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Why do you think some of the other guys that were in Bellator originally, like Missoula and Donaher and some of these guys you talk about, they haven't resurfaced in MMA?
Well, Tim went, you know, when he left, like, so first of all, Tim was brilliant. Tim Danaher is absolutely like one of the smartest men I've ever met in my life. And, you know, he was the hedge fund manager that created got the you know, the seed money the VC money for Bellator to really get going. He went from Bellator to Juul, the vape company, and then that blew up, and he did, you know. So plus he also, you know, he was an owner, so he got bought out. I don't think, you know, I think Bellator was his thing. I don't think MMA was his thing. You know what I mean? For Tim, um, Band B in the house was up. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess Tina, this is me. I'm on with Todd Atkins. It's my homie. We're talking MMA. I spent some time, a big part of my career, kind of like working in that. So we're talking about it. Todd hosts the show here, and yeah, I'm here.
Yep. But I always wondered that because I guess as a fan, someone who's been around a long time, I always wonder how guys drop out of the sport who had a big impact, who were successful, like you said,
Yeah.
Donaher, Missoula, you, Bjorn, and never resurfaced
Oh,
again.
Mazuka, Anthony
Why do you think
Mazuka.
that is?
You talking about Anthony Mazuka, our PR guy?
Mazuka, I'm sorry, yeah,
Yeah,
Mazuka.
yeah, yeah, Mazuka.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
He did all right. He went. Where did he go? He went somewhere. Where's he? He did good. But yeah, um, the thing with MMA is, man, other than like the UFC or Bellator, I don't know what the PFL pays their staff, but like, I mean, like I haven't worked for less than six figures for a long time, man. You know, since I was in my 20s, and the other promotions other than UFC or Bellator aren't going to pay that. So if you have the marketable skills that you can apply them to MMA or you can apply them to another, you know, uh, segment of sector or whatever, you're going to go where the money is. I think. I
How
do.
do you become an how do you become an entertainment director like you've been for so long? Talk to me about that.
Well, the first thing I want to say is you want to keep what you have up here. See this? I used to have I
Have
used to
fun.
have the hair, bro. Your hair looks good. I used to have no. So yeah, entertainment director. It's fun, man. It's stressful. Like it's event coordination, really, at the end of the day. And the old adage about event coordination is like it's like riding a bike. Like once you know how to do it, it's like riding a bike. Except the bike is on fire, and you're on fire, and everyone wants something from you at the same time. You know, so it's a lot of stress with some fun. And but for me, it's always been about like the memories that I know I helped play a part in creating. So I would always say,
Mhm.
like, whether I have a show with 50 people, and I've done small shows like comedy shows way back in the day. Like I had Cat Williams for, $1,000 way back in the day in front of like 100 people in a little restaurant in Central California. And then I've been, in arenas where I had 10,000, 15,000 people. Is I like seeing smiles, man, and knowing that I played a small role in like a memory, especially if I see like fathers and sons. That was the best thing about Bellator is I was the one that would stand and on the headset, send the fighters out, tell them it's time to go, and then after the fight, I was in the cage, making sure everyone corners were in the right spot and no one was behind the referee. Yeah, I hate it when they mess up the shots. And they get in the back and they're all like, "Oh, I want to get on camera," and I was the one that was like, "No, you fucking stay there. You stay there. Don't move." And but I think the one of the most fun aspects of that was I had us make these little stickers, these little Bellator stickers, right? And we'd always have them in our flight cases, and walking through arenas and stuff, or walking the ramp or whatever, see kids and giving them stickers and stuff, and you see these kids light up. That was like that was fun, man.
Now, but what I wanted to ask you is, how did you become a director of entertainment for a casino?
Oh, okay, great question. Yeah, so um, I had some experience in the nightclub business, right? Very limited experience. The Tachi Palace, the Palestinian Gaming Center, was expanding, and they needed a ton of people. They needed, a bunch of people. So um, this was 1999. My stepfather actually was a member of the tribe, so I was able to get my application kind of to the top of the list. And then I was living in Denver, and I used to be a weatherman. So I had nightclub experience, and VIP party experience and things like that. Because I worked at the biggest nightclub in Western New York. We did get like 4,000 or 5,000 people in there on certain nights. And I drove from Denver. They brought me out 2 times for interviews. And they hired me as a special events manager, and they said, "Look, we believe that you can learn this. Like, there's things in here that you don't have the experience, but we feel like you can get it." So um, they hired me. I was a department of one. We were just building the casino. It wasn't even open yet. All we had was a tiny little bingo hall. So we were all sort of like learning on the job. And I did that. And after like 3 years, I think it was about 2.5, 3 years, and I had some staff under me at that time. Um, they wanted to make me a director, so they made me the entertainment director, and it's just kind of grown from there to where now I'm a corporate senior executive, blah 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 blah, of 3 places. You know,
I want to ask you something about because I know you probably book a lot of these acts that I've seen come through my area. Is there only like a pool of people you can usually get every year, and they're usually the same ones you had the year before? Or how does it, because it seems like the same people come through over and over and over.
you, so what's funny, what's interesting about that, man, is you're absolutely right. You will see that a lot of times with casinos, they bring the same acts every 12 months. It's like, and that question actually, when I interviewed, so I want to say this too. I was happy working for Bellator in the sense that I love working for. I loved Viacom. I loved all the people there. I loved the fact that I was working on the TV side as well, so I was getting that experience and making those relationships. And I genuinely cared for and enjoyed working with just about everyone there. There was a couple people that you know probably didn't, but that's like any work situation. I don't think you're going to get along or vibe with 100% of everyone, right? But you can work well together. You're just not homies. Um, and wait, what was the question again, Todd? Shit.
Why do the same acts keep
Oh,
rotating through year
yeah,
after
yeah,
year?
yeah, yeah. Okay, so as I was with Bellator, I was out here in New York going through this process because it took like 4 months, right? With the recruiters and all the different things, and one of the questions was, can you book shows? The previous regime said we could only book shows 6 months in advance. Can you book them further in advance? I said, absolutely. You should be booking shows like 12 months in advance. And they said, do you have to bring the same acts back every year? Because it's like we're getting tired of seeing Kenny Rogers, rest in peace, but we're getting tired of seeing him every year. And I said, 100%. It takes effort. You just need someone that cares and that is willing to, not go on autopilot. And unfortunately, what happens a lot of places is an act does well at a casino, and then the mindset is, well, it did good last year. Let's just do it again. Let's just do it again. Just keep doing it again. And it's also different promoting shows in the casino environment because the first box that you have to check is, will our players want to see it? You know, if casino players in your player database don't want to go to it, then you're looking at, okay, this is just a cash play, and we don't know if we're going to get gaming out of it. So it's
Mm.
just a yeah, it's a
That's
little
interesting because you would think if you live in a big city and you have a casino there. I mean, I think Tulsa's a
Tulsa's.
mid-sized city.
Yeah, it's a great, and Oklahoma itself is just the Choctaw and Windstar, they have amazing venues. Like their theaters are ridiculous.
But I mean, we have a Hard Rock here, and I would think so. You're telling me it's not necessarily that they want to bring people from the outside, even if they can bring a large crowd from that. They're more concerned about the people that are gaming.
You yeah, I mean you have a couple things going on. You have there used to be like, I don't know if it's still true, but we used to say 80% of our revenue is generated comes from 20% of our player database, or 20% of our players. Those are the grinders, the people that are there every week, and they're playing slots, 400, 500, $600, $1,000 a week, whatever. And sometimes those people are, the other thing too is like the average casino guest has always been, you know, female 45 to 64, something like that, right? That's kind of like the typical broad stroke. That's our player. And if you bring in something like an MMA event, and you might scare some people. So when you get what's called displacement, so a person that otherwise might always come every Friday night and they spend $500 a week, they're retirees or whatever they are, I don't know. But they see, oh, there's a fight. Well, they don't want to be around these fighting people, and they don't think they're going to get their favorite machine. They don't think that their parking spot's going to be there. It's going to be too busy or whatever. So those people don't show up. And then what happens is you have an all cash crowd. And especially with MMA in the early days, it was a lot of younger fans, a lot of younger people, 18 to 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds. They didn't have a ton of discretionary income, and they weren't gambling a lot because they were spending their money on the tickets to the event, and they wanted to get hammered. So you would actually lose money in the casino on those days, most of the time. And that's why a lot of casinos would move towards deals like with the King of the Cage, where you just give them the door, so you're not assuming as much risk, and things like that.
So that's why they're always bringing in the older acts.
Yeah, it's yeah. What a casino act, like when I started, casino acts were still like BB King and different, Chicago's still a casino act, but it's
Yeah.
kind of changing now. You sort of, at least my this has always been my philosophy as a someone that books hundreds of shows a year. Um, I feel like if people get to be in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they have discretionary income and they want to go out and spend money, they're gonna want to relive shows from like their 20s. Like my
Oh.
20s, man. That was my fucking glory days, man. And so what I do is I have to reverse engineer and say, okay, if someone's 55 right now, I go back 35 years from now. So I go back into the, late 90s or something. You know what I mean? And those become the new casino acts that will bring out the people that are, 45, 50 plus. Like, for instance, on April 15th, I have Tesla, the rock band Tesla, coming to Niagara Falls. And when I pitched it to my boss, she was like, they only what? And I was like, trust me, just trust me, trust me, trust me. That show is like sold out, and like it's not entirely sold out, but it pretty much, of the available tickets we had that we could sell, because we have certain tickets that have to get held for like Seneca Nation members. So until we can't release them till a certain time, or there's the tickets for players. But that show sold like crazy. Culture Club, Boy George. That's another a new casino act. You know what I mean? Like these 80s, 90s, early 2000s. They're because the reality is the people that grew up listening to Jerry Lee Lewis and uh, Little Richard and Chuck Berry and stuff, which they used to be casino acts, Blue Oyster Cult and all these things. They're dying, man. It's because I don't mean to be morbid, but life is a cycle, and you have to, in the casino business, much like a lot like the beer business too. So you have to reharvest players. You have to like continually. So you can use entertainment to reach people that way. And I'm trying my best to use this platform. Use TikTok. Creating this TikTok meetups in Niagara Falls as a way to introduce people and bringing people that are we call NTB, new to the brand. So it's all by it's all it's all strategic. It's all by design, um, and it's all fun and stress.
Now I know you're really busy, so I appreciate you taking this time to do this stuff.
Mm,
Um, but I
that's
wanted to
my
ask
pleasure,
one more
man.
thing. So, when you talk about use the term casino acts, and I kind of know what you mean, but I want to know like how big is that pool that you're allowed to draw from? The
Um,
casino act pool.
yeah, so I mean, it's pretty big. It's like anything, it's going to be budget dependent, and but I've, for instance, like this weekend I have the Spinners for 2 nights in our small showroom at Niagara Falls. The week after I have Paul Rodriguez for 2 nights in the small room, and then the week after that I have Jay Leno in my big room at Seneca Allegheny. And then March 24th, I have the LFA, Legacy Fighting Alliance, which I love. I love Ed, Mark Bieri, Sven. All those guys are great, and they've been putting on great shows for us. That's March 24th, and then like April 13th and 14th. Well, April 13th, I'm getting new hip. But April 13th and 14th, I have Debbie Gibson in the small room.
Oh
Tesla on the
wow,
15th.
Debbie
Yeah,
Gibson.
she's
Okay.
she's she's a lot of fun. Uh, what else? I got Travis Tritt coming up, Jeff Foxworthy in April, Ario Speedwagon in June. And I've gone everywhere from I've had Tim McGraw, Miranda Lambert, Blake Shelton, Pitbull, Kiss. Yeah, it's if we can fit it, if it'll pencil, and we feel like players will want to see it, and it'll drive some incremental revenue. Because no matter what business you're in, the goal should be to make more money on February 26th of this year versus February 26th of last year. So you're moving in the right direction if you're making money incrementally year over year. So we try that as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I could talk about this kind of stuff all along. Do you feel like acts tour longer now because they can't sell, as much tapes and not tapes, but CDs and DVDs and
Yeah,
stuff online, the stuff they're download. They can't sell it like they used to when we were kids. You know what I mean? Where
yeah.
you
I
would
mean,
sell a million records, or now they
yeah.
can't monetize their stuff.
Yeah, the streaming services definitely played a big part in all that. But I mean, concert revenue has always been a major contributor to their to what their annual earnings. Did you see the Elvis movie, the new Elvis movie that
Yeah,
they
yeah, it's awesome.
see how they had him on the road? How the Colonel
Yeah.
always had him on the road because that's where they made their money because they were getting when you cut a record deal depending on what your deal is like you might only be getting a couple points a couple cents per record, but when you're playing concerts, man, that's all coming to you, or the tour promoter if a tour promoter like Live Nation now, they're a big one. AEG, that's a big one. They might go to someone like nowadays a Live Nation would go to Elvis and say, Elvis, here's $100 million, we're going to put you on a 40-city tour. And you don't have to worry about if we sell the tickets, we keep the money. Here's your $100 million. Go out there and perform every night. Um, so definitely the live touring has always been a big part of the revenue for sure. And they're going to keep riding it. Like how many farewell tours are some of these acts going to have? It's if people, it's like if people are willing to continue to pay to see you, I think you're going to continue to see people out there, and for some of them, and fighters included. And I'll give you a little Ken Shamrock story about celebrity and fame and hanging on to things, and it kind of goes part and parcel with touring acts. Ken and Kimbo were at Mohegan Sun to promote the fight that they were going to do, and I was driving back to the airport in Hartford with Ken and his wife Tanya. Um, After the next day, and Ken was talking about and Ken at this point, I don't know, he was probably still in his late 40s at that point. I can't remember, or I don't think he was quite 50 yet. Um, he just said, man, he said if you ever felt like walking out in an arena and hearing 20,000 people scream your name, it's like he's like it's like a drug. It's like celebrity and fame's like a drug, man, and some people just can't. They don't want to give it up. It's the money, but it's the it's the celebrity too that's hard for some people to part with, you know. So they hang on a little too long because they just can't. They don't want to give that up.
Yeah, because I see some of these older acts and I'm like, can't these people retire? They probably made a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah. There's some that should because they don't really have it anymore, and there's some that still have their chops. Like I'll use Air Supply for instance. Air Supply still sounds amazing. Real,
Right.
Rick Springfield, 72, dude's in better shape than. I mean, you would think he's built like Shemaev. He's got 8 pack. You know,
But why does he
uh,
want to work into his 70s?
yeah, but they have fun. You know what it is?
That's what I want.
It's like the musicians, man. They just want to rock. You know, and they just rock and rock and rock and they're getting paid and they don't stop. Now fighters that hang on too long, I'm thinking, man, you're getting punched
Yeah,
and
that's
shit,
true.
man. It's a little different.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I
But
think it's a good thing to end on. I mean, I know it's taking up a lot of your time, but
no, I'm
yeah.
I'm grateful, man. I had some things to show you too, little and Todd, if you send me a give me a mailing address. So this is a coaster that Dave and Buster's did when we were gonna have Tito and Rampage fight, and no one has these, man, and because that fight didn't happen because Tito's neck, um, and then Rampage fought Joey Bell,
Miguel,
huh?
Miguel is trying to work on an MMA museum project,
Oh, really?
like a real
Yeah,
MMA museum. He's got some guys. Yeah, I think you probably have some stuff, cool stuff that they would like,
yeah,
probably. But
yeah,
they're
man,
just
yeah.
kind of still in the talking stages of it. But
Okay, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, man. Let me know. Absolutely, bro. Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, Christian, it was great talking to you, the Gen X dad. So now you guys know some history that you wouldn't have known otherwise, maybe. And
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate this, bro, man. Thank you. It's always great to talk to you. And I don't get to talk MMA that much, you know, especially on my
yeah,
lives because you know I know a lot of the women like fights, but I don't have as many dudes, so I need more dudes.
yeah, more dating advice and stuff.
Oh shit,
That's
I
what
suck
people
at
like.
that, huh? Uh, but no, thank you, man. I appreciate it, brother. Appreciate your time,
Yeah,
man.
I
Have
appreciate you always
a
gracious
great
with your
rest of your
time.
night, and please do send me a mailing address, man, because I wanna send you something.
Sure thing.
All right,
I
brother.
appreciate it. Take
You're
care.
welcome. All right, you too, bro. Peace.